is our friend Chad. He's been our super mod the past month as we work through these chats, and he's helped me with questions the past few weeks. So thank you so much for joining us, Chad.
Of course. And, pleasure to talk to you, Gary. And I'm just going to relay all the questions that we've gotten. Pre-live chat, we asked for people to post things on Twitter and Facebook and all the other channels. And boy, the audience today is just, it's just scrolling past with questions. So I'm going to try to get to as many as I possibly can as you'll have patience with me. So it looks like I'm going to sort of go off the script a little bit here because we've gotten a bunch of questions about an unreleased track called Heartbreak Souvenir. Everybody seems to be very into that song and wanting to know anything you can remember about it.
I know we did the track. I know we lost the track. And I can't tell you much more about that particular one. I don't remember.
Do you happen to remember if there was a connection to another lost track called Kind Spirit? That was the other question that came in.
It's another track I remember we did that we lost, meaning we didn't use it.
Right.
But I have nothing specific I can tell you about either one.
Okay. Got it. All right. So let's go to the next question. Jim Ferraiulo on Twitter. I'm dying to know if there is any film footage from inside the studio. I think we know the answer to that. Okay.
No.
Bummer. That would have been fun to watch. Dan Novak on Twitter wants to know who was funnier in the studio, Walt or Don? Loaded question there.
There was an accumulative effect amongst the people in a room. There was no one stand-up comic.
Y'all were pretty okay. Between Dad though and Walter, Dad punning all the time. My dad was addicted to puns.
Your dad was the worst punner, and it was almost abusive at a point. Not so much the comment, but the repetition. Your father had like an automatic kind of thing built in. So if he heard certain words, he would say the same thing each time. Over the years, we heard them a lot.
Oh no, Dad with the repeating puns like high stakes. I can't wait to see that meme, by the way, the Dan Vault.
I'm going to have to work on one of those too. All right, so Camps Jams, who was with us today on the stream, wants to know, Gary, if you still have your famous pig nose T-shirt.
No. But I don't. I have lots of my old stuff, but I don't have that. No.
Pig nose shirt. Where's that from?
It's from the back cover of Katie Lied.
Oh, wait. Is that with the
Helium? It's the only pictures of anybody on any album.
Mm-hmm. Besides the infamous one where my dad's hand is coming from underneath the console, there's that amazing back cover. What album is that, Chad, with Dad the back cover?
Countdown to
Yeah, that's Countdown.
Okay. Whose idea was that, to get Dad underneath the console, the recording console?
It wasn't the issue of getting your dad to do that. The issue was getting your dad not to do that. But there he was. I was standing just on the other side of that console. And, what can I say? Your dad, for some reason, found himself under the console and put his hand up. No direction. Your dad was, creative on his own.
It's so iconic. People can't, they're like, whose hand is that? Some people think it's yours. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Fantastic.
So,
it wouldn't have dawned on me to go under the console.
And they wanted. Okay, so let's talk about the helium take. Actually, while we're there at the helium take in Sombrero, what do you remember about the Schlitz ad? The Schlitz beer jingle we've all recently heard and had a lot of fun with. Did you have to go get the helium tank, or was this an ad agency?
No. One of those guys came in with the helium. I think it was Jeff, but I could be wrong. It wasn't me, wasn't Donald, wasn't Walter, that I'm sure of. Pretty sure it wasn't Denny. So by reason of elimination, I'm going to say it was probably Skunk. Probably.
Mm.
Don't mean to demean you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, well, so he did the helium, he did the Spanish. He did the
He
Spanish.
did well. Jeffrey was born in Mexico.
Yeah, and then the
And
sombreros though.
the sombrero, all of the additional, paraphernalia came in the room by the people who want them. We didn't order anything. I didn't order anything. I did not produce that element of the session.
Did y'all work on any other jingles, or was the beer jingle
No,
the only one?
that was the only one. I think it got
Wow.
infamous. I think it was infamous what happened, and they all shunned us.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Sorry for the set. Sorry for the distraction, Chad. Let's go back to the questions.
Not at all. It's
Well,
all relevant. It's all great. All right, let's go back to my pool of questions here. So Glenn, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, Iba, wants to know the origin of your production, Gary, on the Eye to Eye album from 1982. He says the song "On the Mend" is a favorite of his.
I don't remember that song, but I was at Warner Brothers and someone sent me a track or two of their music. They had been producing music in England, and I was drawn to it. I was in England. I met Julian and Deborah, and we talked. I suggested we do an album. I signed them to Warner Brothers, and that's how that happened. And they remain, both of them, close friends of mine right now.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
David Bianco, who was on the chat with us, I believe, on the stream here, wants to know the electrostatic speakers. Were those was the inception of using those around the time of Pretzel Logic in the studio, and did it influence how the album ended up sounding, especially the high end? I'm paraphrasing. It was a sort of deeper question than that, but I wanted to make it easier to digest.
The speakers he's talking about were called magnaplaners, and they didn't appear on Pretzel Logic. They appeared on Katie Lied. And Walter and Denny were our, apart from your dad, I think your dad went also. They were our tech people. Donald and I really didn't have any expertise, and that's a stretch even to use that word, regarding, equipment and hi-fi gear. And they went to West LA one day, and they brought back 8 large panels of magnaplaners that we lined up in front of the console, in front of the glass, and we mixed Katie Lied with them, and it was great sounding.
Great. All right, so going back to the earlier days, Billy SBC, who is with us on the stream, wants to know that when Walter and Donald first walked into your office, did you want to call security, or were you ready to give them a job right away?
Oh, no. I knew Donald and Walter from Brooklyn long before we went to LA. They didn't walk in the office. Along with Steve Bowie, we made an arrangement and they came out, but I had known them for the few years before we came to LA.
And when they got to LA, I've never heard this story, but apparently Billy knows it. Did you guys ever get arrested going through a drive-through at Jack in the Box?
Not me. I've never been to Jack in the Box.
There you go. All right, moving on. Music Tracker, who's on the stream. Laura Nyro's album, Walk the Dog and Light the Light. What do you remember about those sessions?
Just fabulous. She's one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite people. We were really good friends for many years. And we were both, I'm a Hall of Fame night owl. and so was she. And we would talk some nights, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And she called me one night and said that she had been in remission, and now she wasn't anymore. And she had an album that she wanted to do, and called and said, "Let's do it together." So we did, and it was Bernard Purdy, Chuck Rainey, Elliot Randall, Michael Landau, and Laura, late at night up at a studio Donald and I owned called River Sound. And it was like, going to some great club and listening to guys play fabulous music and her playing and singing. It was just great. There's a reason she's in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Agreed. Cameron Fairchild on the stream with us today wants to know if, he just asked a follow-up question too. Did you go to high school with Kenny Vance, and any stories from the early days with Kenny, with Jay and the Americans?
I did not go to school with Kenny Vance. He grew up in Belle Harbor, and I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to school with Howie, who was a member of Jay and the Americans. And, I was like a fifth or sixth wheel to them. They were having hits and making records with my favorite, producers, Lever and Stoller. So I glommed on, and where they went, I went. And sort of gave me an entree into the studio more than the music business. And again, got to meet Mike and Jerry, who befriended me, and I don't even know what to say about that, but they were my favorite music producers and writers. And I watched them one night after I met them. What happened was there was a song called "Only in America," and the Drifters, Mike and Jerry wrote that and recorded it with the Drifters, which was my favorite singing group at the time, Benny King. And no station south of Washington would play it.
Oh.
So Mike and Jerry loved the song, as they should. So they erased the Drifters, unbelievable as that was, and they put Jay and the Americans on it. And so I went to the studio that day, and there was Mike and Jerry. And, I saw it. Jerry said to me, "If you want, why don't you come back some days? We're recording." Well, that was like an invitation to, sitting in on the best. And so I did, and I went there one night. They were recording Cool, Cool Kitty from New York City. And I saw Jerry say to Mike, "I don't know, I don't really like that. Ask them to, I don't know, make it a little purplish." And I realized when he did that, I said, "I can do that." And so I just felt comfortable being in the studio. I didn't write music. I didn't play music. I should have, but didn't. And yet I felt like I had an ear to know what was good or not good or what I liked. And watching Jerry work as a non-musical person also with his ear, that was one of the best parts about being around those guys.
Well, you were certainly right, Gary, about having an ear. So, as all of the stuff that you've produced has sort of bore out over the years, it's amazing. All right, so
good ears,
for sure. Let's talk about, if we can, Michael Kaplan wants to know about the chronology of the second arrangement. Do you remember when it was erased? And what studio was it recorded at? I think we might have covered this previously, but if anything you can add to that.
I was in the Stage Delicatessen having dinner with my daughter and my son. And Roger walked in and said they erased second arrangement. Well, with all due respect to Simpson, Roger could be, a joker. I didn't take him seriously. He wasn't crying. I finished my meal. I walked around the corner to the studio, which was the basement of Studio 54. It's not there anymore, so it's okay to say it was called Soundworks. And my son and daughter, we walked around the corner and downstairs, and when we walked in, there was the tech person sitting on the floor crying. And I got the drift that Roger wasn't kidding. That's what happened. The engineer was aligning the digital machine. And he went to the leader, and he thought he was at the tail leader, but he was at the head leader. So when he put all 32 tracks into record to align the machine, he was erasing everything.
All but the last 14 seconds, if the lore
No,
is
it
just
was a
true.
little more than 14 seconds, but no verses and no choruses.
Oh, wow.
And none of us we didn't make copies. We would leave the studio at 2:30 in the morning. We were going to be back at 1. There was no point. I wasn't going to listen, so we didn't. We didn't have extra copies. Well, your dad made a copy for some reason. I'm not sure why, but he did. But we were back the next day, like 9 hours later.
Work tapes.
I don't know what that means. I can't imagine he went home and listened, but whatever.
Cassette tapes. That's what I was told. It was like they would take cassette tapes of the mix to go home and listen to whatever.
No, it had to be DATs. None of us took cassettes to listen to anything, but there were DATs being made, and I think
80s.
That's where you got it from.
Late 80s. Well, how was it working below Studio 54?
Yeah.
It was fine. You wouldn't even know.
But I want to know about going. Okay, how many times did you guys go up there to party?
I never went. And
you never went?
No, never.
Donald, Walter.
I don't know of any of us who ever went upstairs to quote party.
My mom went.
Well, your mom was a party girl. Of course she went.
I think she was only like 24 or 23 to her defense. Hi, Mom. She's in the chat, by the way. She says, hi, Gary.
Hey, Connie. The only thing we did.
You guys didn't go up there to dance? Oh,
there was a door in the back of the studio that had a staircase that went up into the main room of 54. No, we didn't do that. But there was a pay-per-view fight that they were going to show in Studio 54, a Don King production. And I don't know if you know who Don King is, Simpson, but he was the premier boxing promoter. And you didn't want to, you didn't want to steal from him. Let's leave it at that. But we wanted to watch the fight. So your dad went upstairs and he spliced the wire and he ran a wire downstairs. So we sat in the control room and we watched the fight with our feet up, wondering if any one of Don King's assistants were going to come and, sort of carry us away. But that's the only thing I can remember of being involved with Studio 54.
Oh my God, I've heard some stories. I think was that the studio Paul Sloman was working at. He fought. I don't know if there's stories we can necessarily talk about. So maybe I'll just move on to the next question.
Well, they may be. I'm sure there were stories you wouldn't want to talk about today, but it wasn't me. And if your dad was there, he didn't come in the morning and tell us about it.
Yeah, all right. Well, that was a missed opportunity, Gary Katz. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Okay.
You guys weren't dancers, though, I guess. I mean, I guess I can't see
No.
that, though. I don't see Donald Fagen letting loose at a club. Maybe we should, though. Maybe it's time.
Well, you
Maybe
can
we should
call
go
him.
dancing.
You can call him and suggest it.
Mom says, your dad and I danced a lot at Studio 54. My dad was a dancer. He actually won a dancing contest. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah. But before his recording days, when he was in high school, he actually won a dancing contest.
In Cucamonga.
Yep. In Cucamonga.
Quite a thing to be able to say. Winning dancing contests in Cucamonga.
I love it. That's where I got my dancing skills from. So there you
go.
go.
Okay.
There you go. All right. So next question, Chad. Thanks. These are great.
Oh, for sure. So I guess as a follow-up to the whole second arrangement debacle, the re-recording, and this is from Lady Aptitude, who's with us on the stream, when everybody went back into the studio and tried to record it again, why was it not up to standard? Did you think it was acceptable, Gary? Do we know? I mean, I don't think we have tapes of that because they would have surfaced by now, I'm sure. But anything you remember about the re-recording attempts?
Well, the re-recording, I'm kind of responsible for that because that was at the moment, it was my favorite song that we were recording for the record and what I thought for sure was going to be the single. So I wanted to re-record it more than anyone else. But we needed songs for Gaucho. We were short songs. Which in retrospect, created Third World Man. That might not have made the record if we had second arrangement, because maybe we would have felt we had enough songs, and I would have been unhappy in retrospect if we didn't finish Third World Man, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. Begs another question just about that era. So the Bear, was that an Asia recording that got left off, or was that a Gaucho era track?
You mean the Bear got you?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Fair enough.
I just don't remember. Were you Third World Man was not Third World Man when it was written. Actually, it was called Were You Blind That Day? And it was recorded an hour after we did Asia, because Asia was recorded in one take and we had time. We didn't know what to do at the time. And Don said, well, I have this song, Were You Blind That Day? So Gadd played Were You Blind That Day? Because again, we were there, for no time.
Right.
And when we lost second arrangement, Donald said, we have that track from Gadd playing it, on the Asia dates. I'll rewrite it and we can use that. And it turned out to be Third World Man.
And is the story about Gadd being down the hall recording something else when you guys were mixing Asia? Is that true? Where he didn't know it was him on the on the final
wait a
cut?
minute. Ask me the question the way you did again. Is it true that what?
Is it true that Steve Gadd was recording, when you guys were mixing, I think you were finalizing the mixes for Asia, and then you brought him down to listen to it, and he said, who's that?
It's a little more colorful than that. But
okay.
Yeah, he was recording with Michael Franks down the hall, and we had just about finished the mix. And someone walked in and said, Gadd's down the hall with Michael Franks. And I said, okay, I'll go down and let him know we're finishing, mixing, that we're down here, which I did. And I said, Donald, Walter, and I are down the hall. Why don't you come down? And he walked in, and, it was the end of a day for him. He had been playing. I said, I want to play you something. And we played him a finished mix of Asia. He sat right in front of the speakers. We played it really loud. It was great sounding, just great. And when it was done, he turned and said, "You'll have to excuse this expression. Who's that? Who's playing drums?" And so Donald, Walter, and I, and your dad and Elliot, the five of us, looked at each other, like, and I said, "You are stupid." And he said, "I'm a motherfucker." That's what happened.
Oh, that's amazing.
Good story and true.
All right, let's do a few more from the folks on the stream. So SV O'Rourke wants to know, is it true that Howard Kalin of the Turtles was offered the lead singer gig in Steely Dan around 72?
No.
Okay.
No. We are thrilled that Howard and Mark showed up one night. It was about as much fun as we could have in one night, but no is the answer.
Right. SinSat or SinCat Pro, can you please ask Gary which mix of the albums he produced he thinks is the best?
When we left it, well, I'll
That's a
say
big
one
question.
thing. Well, for all the records that we did, well, I was involved in 7, I think. 8, 7. We never remixed one song. When we left, it was done. So every mix we did was as good as we thought it could be that night, and never revisited one track. So
And do you have a favorite of any album, Dan or not Dan, that you've produced over the years? Anything stand out that you're most proud of?
Hard.
Except for Root Boy,
Except for Root Boy. That's an exception.
Katie lied.
Okay.
Why? Do you have
Yeah.
a why?
Great music.
The feeling, everything was
Despite,
there.
despite the infamous problem we had.
The DBX.
It was my favorite.
Katie lied, and was that
That
the
boy
first?
crucified on the other side of no tomorrow.
And that was the first. Was that the first album? Wait, was that the 4th album? So the first 3 were the Steely Dan band, and so that was the first one where.
No.
Did I get it
First
wrong?
2 were the band, and the third we started to splinter. Jim Gordon played drums, and to where we met Jeff Porcaro and David Page, they played Night by Night. That was the beginning of utilizing other people.
Okay, and actually, I have my friend Kyle Kyleman is actually in the Facebook chat. I'm sorry if I'm not engaging with the Facebook chat, folks, because it's mainly we're chatting on YouTube, but I see some of the questions. Kyle actually helped us do your interview a decade ago. So Kyle says hi, and he's in the chat. And he wants to know okay, I want to know your thoughts about Nightfly. Do you like my microphone? Does it look Nightfly-ish?
Oh, that's the story. So when the photograph was taken for the cover, everything was fine until Donald noticed that the microphone was backwards.
Oh no, I've done that.
So they reshot it.
So the cover is the microphone the right side, right?
They redid it when Donald realized it was backwards.
Somebody told me I had it backwards too. So I feel you, Donald. It's a great cover. How cool.
Very cool.
So
really
moody.
Cool.
It's a cool cat, that Donald Fagen in that photo. So what are your thoughts on the Nightfly? So that happened so now it's the first solo project. How was that migrating from Steely Dan band stuff to Donald as a solo project? How did that feel?
Probably was weirder for him than me because he didn't have his partner. And I don't know. I mean, it was just it was different. Walter wasn't there to fine-tune things as he did, or play, which Donald and I loved. So we relied on some other people that we knew but hadn't utilized before, and Wendell became a star.
That was actually Kyle's question from earlier too. Sorry if I'm not getting all your questions, Kyle, but what are your memories of Wendell? How it got made, the funding, the use on the track, and awarding of the gold record, actually platinum record, to Wendell. Yeah, so Wendell was the star of Nightfly, got invented for Gaucho.
Wendell got invented because one day when we couldn't get a track for Hey 19, Donald turned to your dad and said, "Can't you fucking invent a machine that'll play steady drum tracks?" That's what happened. And your father said, "Yeah, give me the money and the time and I'll do it." So we did. Donald, we did. And he basically left for a few months and sat in his apartment on Lincoln Towers that you couldn't walk into, because I went there once for some reason, and you had to stand outside the door to talk to him, at least at that point, because there were all of these things on the floor. And so I remember I went there for 2 minutes and stood outside and talked to him about something. And then one day he said, "Okay, I'm ready." And he came to the studio. Well, you know what it is. It's his mainframe, IBM mainframe, and quite heavy. And he came in studio. The studio was a staircase down from the street level. So someone helped him. Donald and I wanted nothing to do with this. And so we stood all the way in the corner when your father and guys were helping him with this gear. We didn't want any part of this. We were just laughing. He plugged it in, and these things kept going up and down, like really fast zeros. And one just stopped. We had no idea what it was. And
A computer, y'all. It's a computer.
It meant nothing to us. And about a half hour later, your dad said to Donald, "So hit this key when you want the snare to come down." And he did, and Wendell was born. And the very first day, it worked immediately with no problem. And then within a couple of hours, when Donald realized what Wendell could actually do, which was dangerous because it now allowed Donald to manufacture that drum part, meaning hi-hat and all, 16th note by 16th note.
Oh, God.
But a couple hours later, we had Hey 19. And when we got to Nightfly, Wendell played every track except one.
Which one? I thought it played all of them. Do you remember?
Oh, I remember. You don't know? Gee
No.
whiz.
I know. I'm not the expert. Chad's the expert.
The only track that wasn't Wendell was played by the new Rolling Stones drummer.
Oh. Which track? Did you say that? Did I black out?
Walk Between the Raindrops.
Oh. He did not play that? Wendell did not play that?
Absolutely not. Steve Jordan.
That's so interesting because I actually found Walk Between the Raindrops on a hard drive, and I thought it was Wendell that did it.
No.
Oh,
Wendell played everything but that. One afternoon, Steve came downstairs to Soundworks, and he played Walk Between the Raindrops.
And do you remember Wendell getting its platinum record? Do you remember how that happened?
No, I don't. I have no recollection of that. You should have a better one than I do.
Yeah, no, but you were there. I came after the fact. I heard it through Dad.
No, yeah. I wasn't there.
The story goes that when Gaucho was nominated for a Grammy, I guess the list of musicians were part of the nomination process back in the day, and Wendell was listed as a musician.
That may be, but I wasn't there.
Yeah, and then the record, and my dad had to call Naris and say, "Look, Wendell's a computer; it's not really a person." And they laughed
Well, the
about it.
back in Nightfly, we gave Jeff Porcaro credit for
Yeah.
all the tracks.
Yeah, that's great, actually. So Jeff Porcaro
Well, we
has a
sat
credit because he used his samples, right?
Well, we would go into the village, and Wendell was reduced now not to the mainframe, but a computer, and we'd be in the village, and we'd put Wendell here, and Jeffrey would stand up, and he would say, "So what do you want?" And Donald would say, "I don't know. Let's try Purdy's kick drum and Keltner's hi hat and your snare." And that's how all the tracks were made for a Nightfly like that with Jeffrey.
Oh, it's so good! Oh my God, you have like the most amazing drummers on the planet, and you just get to pick and choose.
And notwithstanding Jeffrey being, one of my favorite musicians, he got a lot of work from that record.
Gaucho. Yeah.
Well, he played Nightfly. No.
Oh, Nightfly.
All on Nightfly is Jeff Porcaro.
And someone asked earlier, he was not on Asia, or was he busy? What happened with him? Is he not around during Asia? Do you remember?
No.
No? Yeah.
Is he not around? And he's not on any track? I'm not thinking about it right now.
Yeah, Chad, I don't know either.
I don't think he is. I'm trying to think back through the list. I don't believe so.
Somebody asked about that.
I don't know. No, there's no reason.
There's no reason. No reason.
No.
So it's not true. Jeff Porcaro didn't hate Wendell. He.
Oh no. Jeff was a postmodern man.
Aw, postmodern man. Jeff Porcaro. My dad loved Jeff Porcaro too. I actually have somewhere a drawing Jeff did of my dad.
He was as good an artist as he was a drummer. He was an incredible artist, Jeffrey. Jeffrey would come when he'd finish his sessions, and he would just sit and draw, or he'd fall asleep on the couch, and we liked it.
Mm-hmm. I actually have a picture of him asleep on the couch, I think, at Cherokee Studios.
That's
you
really
too.
Funny. I don't ever remember us working one. Oh, you mean Cherokee and the ranch?
The ranch, yeah.
The ranch.
The ranch. Those were the Wild West days too. I've talked about that a few times on this channel. Is there anything you remember from the Cherokee days? Anything that stands out?
Funny. The other day I had the TV on, and somebody was talking about it was some anniversary day of the day Nixon resigned. And I remember we were working in the studio. There was no TV in the studio. And someone said, "Hey, Nixon's going to resign." And we walked up into the main house and watched that. I don't know why. I remember that.
And y'all were next to Charles Manson's ranch, too. I've said that.
Not next to it, but in that general area. Yeah.
Were you there? Dad actually... When was the Charles Manson stuff? Because Dad was actually installing stereo system in Roman Polanski's house, and he got questioned about the murders.
Nope.
Remember any of that lore?
Nope. Not me.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a few people asking about...
And it was before I knew your dad.
Okay.
Because that was 69, 70.
Okay, 69, 70. Sorry, I have to... My timeline is fluid. Okay, so I have a few people asking about Wayne Shorter's solo.
Fabulous. What do you want to know?
What do you want to know? Yeah, they say ask about it, but what do y'all want to know about it?
So we had Asia, and there was this solo that needed to be done. And Walter and Donald would say to me, even long before Asia, "Well, why don't we call?" And they'd say some, pretty well-known name. At one point, like Phil Woods, who wound up playing on Dr. Wu, my favorite Steely song. And he'd say, "I don't know, who do you think should play? I don't know, call Phil Woods." Just as a joke, like call Ray Charles, maybe he'll come in and sing. And I would call all these guys. After a while, we got enough of a reputation, so guys took the call, and I called Phil Woods. I remember that one particularly because I actually went to the airport and picked him up and drove him back. It was all within like an hour and a half. He came in, he played great. I took him back to the airport. He lived in Bucks County at the time. And so when we got to Asia, Donald or Walter, I can't remember who, said, well, why don't we call Wayne Shorter? Okay. So I called Wayne Shorter, and he said yes. For not, he could have said yeah for $100,000, but he didn't say that. It was more than a reasonable amount of money, and it was Wayne Shorter. So he came, and he played. We played him the track. He went out. He was at the Village, and he played once or twice. I would have taken either take. And he said, why don't you guys go get something to eat? I'll write something. So we did. He did. He played. That was it. Wonderful guy. Wonderful.
I love the anecdotes. We have Lady Aptitude in the chat asking, does Gary have any concept of what Dr. Wu is about, or any Steely Dan song for that matter?
For all the songs that I sat and listened and worked with Donald and Walter on, I never once said, what does that mean? I just never did. If I didn't understand, I felt it.
I know Chad and I are like, yeah, we get that. It's about the feeling. And was there any song that was more, I think she asked earlier, was there any song that was more Donald versus Walter, or was it pretty
No.
even?
These guys had a relationship, an unspoken, besides spoken, an unspoken relationship. Inexplicable. Can't explain it. But they were, in the truest sense of the word, at least, musical soul brothers.
Aww.
They just understood each other. I mean, without much being said. And one night, I checked into a hotel in LA that I stayed at, often a boutique hotel called Le Rev. And when I checked in, I stayed there often. The guy said to me, Walter's upstairs. I went, oh, okay. So I went upstairs. I put my bags down. I relaxed, sat down, and I connected to Walter, who, as it turned out, I was in 316. He was in 318. There was this much wall space between us. I never saw him on the trip. We talked on the phone for a few hours one night. And his most meaningful words regarding what you want to know, he said to me, listen, you nor I will ever work with anyone that talented again. That's what I can say. And I can't say that I ever did, although Laura Nyro was right there.
That's beautiful. So, Walter, did you ever go to Hawaii? Because we were there
Not
a bunch.
Not with Walter. Went to Hawaii, unrelated to Steely.
Okay. Sorry, Hawaii has actually been in the news a lot lately, and I've been thinking of it because we.
And I went to that. That's the one town. That's where I went when I went one time.
So, moment of love being sent to Lahaina right now. We had a lot of great memories on Maui with Walter, and I think Donald would go to an island, Kauai or something. But yeah, I was curious because I don't remember you there, but Walter did work there a lot.
He lived there.
Yeah, lived there, worked there.
Got married there.
I have some That's actually where he went. I don't know if I have the history completely right, but from what I've heard, we have Gaucho. There's so much trauma and drama and things happening. Walter actually went to Hawaii, Maui, to go heal and take a break, and then that's when the Nightfly started happening. Do you remember that? Were you in contact with Walter at all, or?
No.
Hmm. Yep. Maui is a magical place, and we are so grateful for that. Dad actually went on the backside of Maui and recorded an hour of perfect ocean sound that I just recently put up on YouTube. So,
Yeah. Your
yeah.
dad liked recording external noises.
Yeah, I think that was his moment of zen. We could never quite take vacations because he was always one of those guys that had a working vacation. Like we were on a vacation, but there was things that had to happen. Like we were filming or he was recording. Like it was never a relaxing vacation. So yeah, Dad was always recording, driving. He was always capturing the moment. I'm realizing now with all these home videos and stuff. And really quickly, somebody asked me about Wendell and where it's at now. At the moment, it's in my closet, and he's on his way to a museum. I don't want to announce where yet, but there's a few museums that have showed interest in housing Wendell. So we're super excited about that, and I'll let you know when I know. But yeah, Wendell needs to go to a museum. It's a super important part of digital audio history. Michael Kaplan asked in the chat, just to clarify the Wendell Nightfly thing. So did Jeff play this song on the kit and then sounds are replaced by Wendell? People have a hard time explaining.
No.
Right.
No. We had a track and a click track, and Jeffrey just played the keys, and he put the beat where he wanted, which we liked. But he played Wendell's keys.
Right. So he was literally hitting like enter on the computer, and then it
That's
would.
why it says drums, Jeff Porcaro.
That's so funny. I love it. I love it. They actually named Wendell. Were you in the room when they named it? Were you there when Dad named it? He said they named it because they were getting in trouble with the drummers union for not having drummers on session days. So he
I
named
don't know anything about that story.
it.
How did he come up with Wendell? Is it an acronym or just?
He had two computers, Wendell and Gertrude.
He named his machines.
He
And
named it Wendell and Gertrude.
And he said in an interview once that Wendell sounded like a jazz musician's name. I don't know.
He came down. I mean, he had already named it.
Aww. Personifying gear, making it human. I mean, those were his other children. To be fair, I carry Wendell around like my 70-pound brother. My dad loved that thing.
Yeah. It was an incredible piece of gear.
Groundbreaking. I mean, how was that shifting from analog to digital? I guess with my dad at the helm, it probably wasn't as complicated as maybe some other people had it. Like, how did you feel from that shift from analog to digital?
Again, Donald and I knew nothing about any of this technology. Nothing. So this was between your dad, Walter, and to some extent Denny. And I vaguely remember listening to these, conversations. Oh, the low end does this, and whatever they decided, we went with. I just didn't know enough about it, and continue not to know enough about it. We trusted your dad implicitly, and Walter was there with Denny. They were thorough. Let's just say nothing got done without a thorough conversation by guys who knew what they were talking about. And we never didn't like it. I mean, the only time you're dead, Donald always wanted tracks. We didn't have enough tracks. So your dad, when we were doing Katie Lied, suggested that there might be a way to hook up two 16 tracks and it would be 32 tracks. Well, there was nothing about anything that your dad said that Donald cared about other than he heard 32 tracks. And so we embarked on that experiment
Mm-hmm.
that was brain taxing to say the
Oh,
least.
yeah. Being on the bleeding edge
Yeah,
of
and that was your
technology.
dad. That was totally your dad's idea. So there's nothing to talk about. On the other hand, it's my favorite record and sounds great, notwithstanding the problem with DVX.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably your dad's decision. We would revisit again if we could. It was It was very difficult to mix, locking up two machines, and it was the first automated console. It was a Harrison console, so we were for the first time trying to figure out how to use automation and have this two machine thing going on, which was incredible. But it's a great record.
Mm-hmm. I actually have Jeffrey Fender. I have a Fen in the chat. Skunk's son. He says hi. He's loving it. He's asking if you have any fun skunk anecdotes. I guess Skunk. Skunk was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and you called him to come out to LA. Was that how that worked, or how did that
Yes.
work?
Yes, I met Jimmy Hotter because he was the drummer of a band I recorded. One of the very first records I recorded was a band from Boston called The Bead Game that Jimmy Hotter was the drummer, and I really liked his style. I was a big fan of the band Traffic, and the drummer in that band, Jim Capaldi, had a style I just loved. And Jimmy Hotter played a bit like that, and I talked to Donald about it, and I knew Skunk from Boston,
Mm.
and it just worked out. There was no guarantee Donald and Walter would like them, meaning as musicians,
Mm-hmm.
but it just worked out.
It worked out, and he's another brainiac. I mean, you got
Yeah.
Skunk, Denny, my dad, Walter. I mean, talk
I
about.
brought up the rear, and I had no problem with it at all.
I love it. You had your other strengths. You brought another dynamic that helped make it all happen. So
It was just, it worked out really well.
yeah, I mean, look, and you guys you trusted Dad. You let him take the lead on the technical stuff, and your albums are still being used to test audio systems.
It's true.
That's
No, listen, it's
amazing.
very shocking and rewarding at the same time. The fact that I might like something doesn't mean others will. But I went to an NAB show 4 years ago and walked in, and you just walk down the aisle, and guys are playing one album or another as, demonstrating their gear. Yeah, it's cool.
It's great. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There won't ever be another Steely Dan, because not only was the craftsmanship there for Donald and his creative genius and Walter and the songs, there was also this technical part and the sonic quality that really do make it one of a kind. So we're so
Your
grateful
dad
for
was
that.
just your dad was just the top of the line at it for whatever combination of reasons. And it was a really terrific marriage between what your dad brought to what he could, Donald and Walter bringing what they could, and just the combination of people. It was more than we could have ever imagined when we started.
That's it. That's it. The keys to the universe. There you go. Energy in motion when everything just creates this perfect storm. I love it. So, Chad, is there any other questions from the chat? I think we're about ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think we've covered all the salient points.
Oh my
Okay.
god, I love it. So I'm
No,
going. What?
What? No, go on.
You wanna keep?
No.
No, let's hang out. I'm gonna do 500 more times, 90 more takes, 90 more hours of YouTube chats.
We didn't do that. I'll tell you though, when we would be doing vocals,
Yeah.
and if Donald would sing and I would say one more. On occasion, he would get really, I don't know if the word is angry, but he would be upset enough to take his headphones, which you got pretty well known for, and throw them against the wall and say to me, "Don't fucking tell me one more when you know it's going to be 10."
Yes, that's a producer thing, though. That's a producer thing. They don't want the artist to get overwhelmed, so they're just like, one more.
So I did. I started to say, "Nah, we need 4 or 5 more." For a minute, I did that, and that stopped.
I love it.